Another thought. This keeping is not only all-inclusive and omnipotent, but also continuous and unbroken. People sometimes say, "For a week or a month, God has kept me very wonderfully. I have lived in the light of his countenance, and I cannot say what joy I have not had in fellowship with him. He has blessed me in my work for others. He has given me souls, and at times I felt as if I were carried heavenward on eagle wings." But it did not continue. It was too good, it could not last. And some say, "It was necessary that I should fall to keep me humble." And others say, "I know it was my own fault, but somehow you cannot always live up in the heights." Oh, beloved, why is it? Can there be any reason why the keeping of God should not be continuous and unbroken? Just think. All life is in unbroken continuity. If my life was stopped for half an hour, I would be dead and my life gone. Life is a continuous thing, and the life of God is the life of his church, and the life of God is his almighty power working in us. And God comes to us as the Almighty One, and without any condition he offers to be my keeper, and his keeping means that day by day, moment by moment, God is going to keep us. If I were to ask you the question, do you think God is able to keep you one day from actual transgression? You would answer, I not only know he is able to do it, but I think he has done it. There have been days in which he has kept my heart in his holy presence, when, though I have always had a sinful nature within me, he has kept me from conscious, actual transgression. Now, if he can do that for an hour or a day, why not for 2 days? Oh, let us make God's omnipotence as revealed in his word the measure of our expectations. Has God not said in his word, I, the Lord, do keep it, and will water it every moment? What can that mean? Does every moment mean every moment? Did God promise of that vineyard or red wine that every moment he would water it so that the heat of the sun and the scorching wind might never dry it up? Yes. In South Africa they sometimes make a graft, and above it they tie a bottle of water, so that now and then there shall be a drop to saturate what they have put about it. And so the moisture is kept there unceasingly until the graft has had time to stroke and resist the heat of the sun. Will our God, in his tender-hearted love toward us, not keep us every moment when he has promised to do so? Oh, if we once got hold of the thought, our whole religious life is to be God's doing. It is God that worketh in us to will and to do of his good pleasure. When once we get faith to expect that from God, God will do all for us. The keeping is to be continuous. Every morning God will meet you as you wake. It is not a question, if I forgot to wake in the morning with the thought of him, what will come of it? If you trust your waking to God, God will meet you in the morning as you wake with his divine sunshine and love, and he will give you the consciousness that through the day you have got God to take charge of you continuously with his almighty power. And God will meet you the next day and every day. And never mind if in the practice of fellowship there comes failure sometimes. If you maintain your position and say, Lord, I am going to expect thee to do thy utmost, and I am going to trust thee day by day to keep me absolutely, your faith will grow stronger and stronger, and you will know the keeping power of God in unbrokenness. Kept through faith. And now the other side, believing. Kept by the power of God through faith. How must we look at this faith? Faith implies helplessness. Let me say first of all that this faith means utter impotence and helplessness before God. At the bottom of all faith, there is a feeling of helplessness. If I have a bit of business to transact, perhaps to buy a house, the conveyancer must do the work of getting the transfer of the property in my name and making all the arrangements. I cannot do that work, and in trusting that agent, I confess I cannot do it. And so faith always means helplessness. In many cases it means, I can do it with a great deal of trouble, but another can do it better. But in most cases it is utter helplessness. Another must do it for me. And that is the secret of the spiritual life. A man must learn to say, I give up everything. I have tried and longed and thought and prayed, but failure has come. God has blessed me and helped me, but still, in the long run, there has been so much of sin and sadness. What a change comes when a man is thus broken down into utter helplessness and self-despair, and says, I can do nothing. Remember Paul. He was living a blessed life, and he had been taken up into the third heaven, and then the thorn in the flesh came, a messenger of Satan to buffet me. And what happened? Paul could not understand it, and he prayed the Lord 3 times to take it away, but the Lord said in effect, No, it is possible that you might exalt yourself, and therefore I have sent you this trial to keep you weak and humble. And Paul then learned a lesson that he never forgot, and that was to rejoice in his infirmities. He said that the weaker he was, the better it was for him, for when he was weak, he was strong in his Lord Christ. Do you want to enter what people call the higher life? Then go a step lower down. I remember Dr. Boardman telling how that once he was invited by gentlemen to go to see some works where they made fine shot. And I believe the workmen did so by pouring down molten lead from a great height. This gentleman wanted to take Dr. Boardman up to the top of the tower to see how the work was done. The doctor came to the tower, he entered by the door and began going upstairs. But when he had gone a few steps, the gentleman called out, That is the wrong way. You must come down this way. That stair's locked up. The gentleman took him downstairs a good many steps, and there an elevator was ready to take him to the top, and he said, I have learned a lesson that going down is often the best way to get up. Ah, yes, God will have to bring us very low down. There will have to come upon us a sense of emptiness and despair and nothingness. It is when we sink down in utter helplessness that the everlasting God will reveal himself in his power, and that our hearts will learn to trust God alone. What is it that keeps us from trusting him perfectly? Many a one says, I believe what you say, but there is one difficulty. If my trust were perfect and always abiding, all would come right, for I know God will honour trust. But how am I to get that trust? My answer is, by the death of self. The great hindrance to trust is self-effort. So long as you have got your own wisdom and thoughts and strength, you cannot fully trust God. But when God breaks you down, when everything begins to grow dim before your eyes, and you see that you understand nothing, then God is coming nigh. And if you will bow down in nothingness and wait upon God, he will become all. As long as we are something, God cannot be all, and his omnipotence cannot do its full work. That is the beginning of faith, utter despair of self, a ceasing from man and everything on earth, and finding our hope in God alone. Faith is rest. And then, next, we must understand that faith is rest. In the beginning of the faith life, faith is struggling. But as long as faith is struggling, faith has not attained its strength. But when faith in its struggling gets to the end of itself, and just throws itself upon God and rests on him, then comes joy in victory. Perhaps I can make it plainer if I tell the story of how the Keswick Convention began. Canon Battersby was an evangelical clergyman of the Church of England for more than 20 years, a man of deep and tender godliness. But he had not the consciousness of rest and victory over sin, and often was deeply sad at the thought of stumbling and failure and sin. When he heard about the possibility of victory, he felt it was desirable, but it was as if he could not attain it. On one occasion he heard an address on rest and faith, from the story of the nobleman who came from Capernaum to Cana to ask Christ to heal his child. In the address, it was shown that the nobleman believed that Christ could help him in a general way, but he came to Jesus a good deal by way of an experiment. He hoped Christ would help him, but he had not any assurance of that help. But what happened? When Christ said to him, "Go thy way, for thy child liveth," that man believed the word that Jesus spoke. He rested in that word. He had no proof that his child was well again, and he had to walk back 7 hours' journey to Capernaum. He walked back, and on the way met his servant, and got the first news that the child was well. That at 1 o'clock on the afternoon of the previous day, at the very time that Jesus spoke to him, the fever left the child. That father rested upon the word of Jesus and his work, and he went down to Capernaum, and found his child well, and he praised God, and became with his whole house a believer and disciple of Jesus. Oh, friends, that is faith. When God comes to me with the promise of his keeping, and I have nothing on earth to trust in, I say to God, "Thy word is enough, kept by the power of God." That is faith. That is rest. When Canon Battersby heard that address, he went home that night, and in the darkness of the night found rest. He rested on the word of Jesus, and the next morning in the streets of Oxford he said to a friend, "I have found it." Then he went and told others, and asked that the Keswick Convention might be begun, and those at the convention with himself should testify simply what God had done. It is a great thing when a man comes to rest on God's almighty power for every moment of his life, in prospect of temptations to temper, and haste and anger, and unlovingness and pride and sin. It is a great thing in prospect of these to enter into a covenant with the omnipotent Jehovah, not on account of anything that any man says, or of anything that my heart feels, but on the strength of the word of God, kept by the power of God through faith. Oh, let us say to God that we are going to prove him to the very uttermost. Let us say, "We ask thee for nothing more than thou canst give, but we want nothing less." Let us say, "My God, let my life be a proof of what the omnipotent God can do." Let these be the two dispositions of our souls every day, deep helplessness and simple childlike rest. Faith needs fellowship. That brings me to just one more thought in regard to faith. Faith implies fellowship with God. Many people want to take the word and believe that, and they find they cannot believe it. Ah, no, you cannot separate God from his word. No goodness or power can be received separate from God, and if you want to get into this life of godliness, you must take time for fellowship with God. People sometimes tell me, "My life is one of such scurry and bustle that I have no time for fellowship with God." A dear missionary said to me, "People do not know how we missionaries are tempted. I get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, and there are the natives waiting for their orders for work. Then I have to go to the school and spend hours there, and then there is other work, and 16 hours rush along, and I hardly get time to be alone with God." Ah, there is the want. I pray you, remember 2 things. I have not told you to trust the omnipotence of God as a thing, and I have not told you to trust the word of God as a written book, but I have told you to go to the God of omnipotence and the God of the word. Deal with God as that nobleman dealt with the living Christ. Why was he able to believe the word that Christ spoke to him? Because in the very eyes and tones and voice of Jesus, the Son of God, he saw and heard something which made him feel that he could trust him. And that is what Christ can do for you and me. Do not try to stir and arouse faith from within. How often I have tried to do that and made a fool of myself. You cannot stir up faith from the depths of your heart. Leave your heart and look into the face of Christ, and listen to what he tells you about how he will keep you.